Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it.
So what do you consider a hidden gem?
Well, I guess there's a couple ways of looking at it. I would say it's probably a place that maybe isn't well known to tourists, might not be featured in a lot of guidebooks or be heavily advertised. So when you're looking at places to see and do in a certain destination, this hidden gem might not be on that list, right? It would also have to be a location that has something that would appeal to visitors, right? So it could be stunning natural beauty, a fascinating history, vibrant local culture. I think those are the kind of things that make up a desirable place that, again, makes people want to go, but maybe people don't know about.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that. I guess another part of being a hidden gem is the authentic experience, right? You get more of a genuine feel for the place, further away from tourist traps that are frequented quite often, like Rome and all those other places. It means interacting with the locals, right? And trying out the local flavors, cuisines and such.
So having said that, do you think that there is such a thing as hidden gems in Italy?
I think there's quite a few, and I don't think we've discovered all of them. Italy is known for its rich culture and history, right? There's so many regions, towns, villages, and they differentiate from each other quite a bit, right? Popular tourist destinations are just a small part of what the country offers.
Yeah, I think you're right. The beauty of Italy is those little towns, right? Little towns and villages that are outside of the main hubs, right? So even if you are going in Tuscany, which is very popular for visitors, there are definitely towns there that most visitors don't go to because they tend to go to the same towns. So I would say that's one aspect of Italy, but I also think even in big cities like Rome, Venice, there are still little things that we considered hidden gems that maybe most people don't know about, right? Because everybody kind of goes to the same places. That could be like a little family-owned restaurant or something like a hidden passage or a building with cool frescoes or something inside that most people don't really go to, right? Italy has a lot of places. Again, what makes it unique to one person might be a normal thing for someone else, right? I think when we talk about hidden gems in Italy, we are talking about places that we as travelers, people coming from outside Italy don't know about, but may be very familiar to the locals. So today, let's talk about one of those hidden gems that may or may not be that hidden, but I think definitely is a gem, and that is Chieti.
Yeah, so Chieti is actually located in Abruzzo. Abruzzo, if you're not familiar with the area, it's actually on the east coast of Italy, just across from Lazio and not far away from Rome. It's probably about, 3 hours, I think, of a drive to Rome. And not many people are familiar with Chieti. If someone goes out to or visits Abruzzo, it's usually the big cities such as Pescara or, visiting beaches like Francavilla, which is a popular destination.
We came across Abruzzo. Well, the whole region kind of came on our radar because when we talked about looking for properties, right? So we've heard a lot of, I don't know if we've heard is the right term, but I keep seeing different articles, different videos about Abruzzo and how it's an undiscovered region and how many people are moving there. So I think we were very curious. So we looked at different towns in Abruzzo and we decided to visit Chieti just to see for ourselves, what it's like. So we took a trip to Chieti and we actually loved it. So we're here to tell you all about Chieti, which, I don't know, do you consider Chieti to be a hidden gem?
I think so. Maybe for Italians, it may not be as a hidden gem because of some of the other attractions that we'll go over later on. But, to people outside of Italy, tourists, I don't think it's a very popular destination. They're probably not very familiar with that city.
Yeah, and I don't even know if Chieti is on the radar for that many people in general. I don't know if it's more of I've been reading about it and that's why I feel like it's everywhere. Whereas if I wasn't looking for it, it probably wouldn't come to my attention. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of seems that either A, everyone is going to Abruzzo looking for properties and trying to move there, or it's just the algorithm that's showing me after I've looked for, hey, is Abruzzo a good place to live? And it's giving me all that information about people who are supposedly going to Abruzzo, or maybe it's just like a good campaign of the people from Abruzzo trying to attract visitors. Either way, we ended up going to Chieti, and we actually drove there, right? So we went on a road trip, which took us through another lesser known region, and that's Molise, right?
So Molise, if you're not familiar with it, was actually part of Abruzzo at one point. It's actually one of the, I guess, newest regions in Italy. There's actually a running joke amongst Italians that basically pretends Molise does not exist due to its size, right? And its, I guess, relative obscurity. Another fun fact about Molise, it's well known for inventing the pasta fusilli. So if you enjoy that specific pasta, you can thank Molise for that.
I think it's hilarious that Italians consider it as a region that doesn't exist. I thought it was very interesting driving through Molise before we got to Abruzzo because, again, we went in March, so we are sort of entering spring. I kept saying to you during the drive, it feels very much like driving in Canada. There are certain spots where you drive through like forested areas, which are very reminiscent to like what you would find in Ontario. And I'm talking more about those certain trees. I think it's birch, the one with lighter bark. And driving through, you kind of feel like you are sort of more in that area. And the trees are close to the road. So maybe that's also why it feels that way. Another thing I noticed about Molise was that a lot of the towns, and of course in Italy, we have small towns all over the place, right? But in Molise, I noticed that those little towns were perched on top of a hill, like on a summit, as opposed to on the foot of a mountain or sort of like throughout scattered as you go up the hill, which is sort of what we see more in Campania. And that was actually more noticeable when we're driving at night because you have darkness and then you see lights on top of like the big hills where all the cities are in the towns, which I thought was kind of cool because very different, right?
Yeah, that drive was actually very familiar to us. It seemed like we were driving through northern Ontario.
There were so many pink flowering trees. Do you remember? It was so incredible to just look over and you see patches of purple, light purple, pinkish flowers. And I was wondering whether they were apples, but I think they were actually peaches. That was really cool to see when you're driving these like big patches of flowering trees. I thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting view as we were driving. We weren't even sure what type of tree they were, but I think it was my cousin that mentioned it might be peach trees.
Yeah, because I think we looked it up. Anyway, another thing that I thought was very interesting, especially when we got closer to the coast, were all those vineyards. Remember, there were just vines everywhere.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of that. You know, I didn't expect to see that many vineyards along the way, but yeah, it's quite populated with that. And I think that's because, you know, there are a couple of wines that are actually very popular that come from the Abruzzo area.
That drive kind of reminded me of when we were in Lake Garda, which is North Italy, and we saw those lemon trees, which kind of seemed like it would be not the climate for it. But I guess Abruzzo, that part of Abruzzo is lower than we are in the mountains here, right? So you'd have a bit of a lower elevation, but you also are closer to the sea, which I guess would make it a good place for the plants, right? But not the plants, the vineyards and the grapes.
I think it's because of the fact that it's not very good for the grapes to be in areas where there's a lot of, you know, exposure to sun. So I think some of the areas with the mountains and hills nearby kind of give that bit of a coverage protection from the sun.
I think it's a great place to go wine sampling, right? If you are looking at taking wine tours and you want to go try something different other than, let's say, Tuscany, I think Abruzzo could be the place where you can actually try some different wine varieties if you happen to go there. So now let's talk about Chieti itself. Chieti is a fairly small town. I mean, it's about 50,000 people, so it depends where you're coming from, whether that's small or not. For us, coming from where we live, that's a way bigger city. And for me, It was a huge surprise because remember before we went, I was trying not to be too hyped up about it. I was like, okay, looks great on pictures. If you look it up, it looks nice. But I bet you once we get there, it might not be as nice. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. What were your first impressions?
Yeah, like initially, I didn't think too much of it. It looked like, the rest of Italy as we were driving in. But as we got closer into the center, it looked fantastic. A lot of historical buildings, architecture. And what I found is it looked super clean. Most of Italy is still, very nice to look at and fairly clean, but I was surprised at how clean the city center was. It's comparable to many of the northern Italy larger cities.
You're right. I didn't really think about it. It was very clean art. Like there wasn't even that much graffiti or like anything spray paint except for that one palazzo in the main square. But other than that, it was very clean, very cute. I would say the architecture, like you said, was great. And we should also mention that Chieti's, I don't know if you would consider it on a mountain. It's a hilly town. It's on a mountain, and the views are incredible. Like you are driving through different parts of Chieti, and some of them they can be pretty steep. But the views, like everywhere you look around, you can see the mountains in the distance with the snow caps, which for me was like, wow, that's really great.
Yeah, I found the views were amazing. You got some fantastic mountain views as you drove around the city, especially on the outskirts. It reminded me of what I've seen on TV and pictures of Vancouver.
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of close to really big mountainous national parks, and it's also kind of close to the beach, right? Because you're about 20 minutes away from the coast, which is very similar to Vancouver, but I would say with lower prices. Vancouver is very unaffordable, but this actually is quite the opposite, other than the comparison of being close to the beach and close to the mountains. Okay, so let's talk about Chieti as a historical town, because again, when we talk about what makes a place unique, and if you're coming to Italy, you're probably looking for some history, you're looking for some great views, you're looking for some great food. I think Chieti delivers. And what was the one thing everybody told us in Chieti?
Everyone kept reminding us that it's older than the Roman era.
That's very true. And it was kind of strange because it was like a theme. Everybody was telling us that, from the restaurant to the real estate agency to some other people. Everybody was, it's older than the Romans, which kind of gives you an idea of the history there, right? When it comes to towns, it's easy to think of Italy as Roman towns, as the ancient towns. But you also have to remember that the Romans didn't just appear out of nowhere, right? There were other cultures, other settlements before the Roman Empire grew. So it's really not surprising to see towns that are older than the Roman Empire. And we live nearby, which is Benevento, and we did another episode on that if you're curious. But going back to Chieti, so the legend, according to what I found, was that Chieti was founded in like 1181 BC. That makes it over 3,000 years old. It was founded by the Greek hero Achilles. It was named after his mother. I don't know how you pronounce it, Thetis. So that kind of aligns with the Roman name of it, which was Theate, right?
Yeah, and that's how the Romans interpreted it, and how it flourished under Roman rule, becoming a large vital hub for the military and trade for them.
You still have the Roman remnants today. I don't think you have a lot of pre-Roman stuff in that town. At least maybe there is stuff hidden underneath the town. But one of the interesting things about Chieti, well, I guess there's too many interesting things, but one of the things was that it was turned into a fortress by Napoleon. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, until it became part of Kingdom of Italy. But during World War II, Chieti was declared as an open city during the war.
So for the listeners that aren't sure what that means, can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so open cities, and I'm not sure how many of them were there, but open city was that both sides of the war, I guess the Allies and the Axis powers agreed upon that it's a city that will be used as neutral ground, right? So you would not be bombing it. Both sides agreed not to bomb it. So Chieti was one of those towns, and it wasn't really damaged during the war because of that.
That would explain the intact architecture we found there. It looks essentially all original, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I loved going along the main square. And there are so many porticos, right? Which are sort of reminiscent of Bologna. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to see such grand buildings because they have quite a few palazzos, right? They have some pretty impressive churches. There is, some Baroque. There is some like more of what I would say are Renaissance style. And I was actually quite impressed with how many really beautiful buildings from back in the day there were, right?
Yeah, and I think we came across a real gem while we were walking around. We ended up stopping at a piazza named Largo Giambattista Vico, and it's actually sometimes referred to Piazza Giambattista. So it's actually centrally located in Chieti, and it's actually a pretty awesome spot to sit down, enjoy the sights and your surroundings, right?
There was some chairs and tables set up, and we ended up having a drink there. And I still couldn't believe, because you're kind of sitting in an old square, but then you have this really gorgeous palazzo. It's like a red facade on one side. Then you have this building that I think it's like Ministry of Agriculture, I think is in there now. And then you have this historic church. It feels so unreal when you think of Italy and hanging out in a, historic area. To me, that was like a quintessential Italian experience that I think a lot of people are looking for, right? Just sitting there, having a drink and being surrounded by all this beauty.
One of my impressions of Chieti when we visited was actually how nice the locals were. Everyone we conversed with was actually very nice to us, helpful. And, it was actually pretty interesting that they're very open over there.
Yeah, it's one of those places where you hear people say, oh, we moved there and the locals, they came and brought us food. And you hear these stories and you're sort of, yeah, okay, sure. But in Chieti, it was kind of like that. Do you remember we were having lunch at this one restaurant and we were talking to the owner and he's like, oh, like, what are you guys doing here? Where are you from? And we said, we're here. We're thinking of moving here. And he said, well, there's a lady here. She's a real estate agent having dinner at like a next table over. I could give you her number.
Yeah, that was actually kind of pretty funny. They welcomed us like as if you were part of the family. Granted, it was a local restaurant, but it's not something you're used to or expect very often, right? I thought they were super nice.
Yeah, and they're also very dog friendly. Few people told us that Chieti is very dog friendly. And I mean, Italy to us is very dog friendly, but I think certain cities, like especially more so. I think Chieti was like, do you remember they were very nice to the dog? And they were like, oh, does she want water? Does she want something else? Everybody's kind of concerned about the dog and whether the dog wants food or water or something like that.
They were super nice, especially when they saw the dog. Granted, all of Italy is pretty open to having your pets just traveling with you and visiting shops and restaurants, but they were surprisingly, very open and super nice.
Yeah, so we went to Chieti because we were looking at it possibly as a location, something that we might want to move to. So from just being there for those couple of days that we were, I think it pleasantly surprised me. I think Chieti lives up to the hype. It's a very friendly town. It's a beautiful town. It's a historic town, which also checks all the boxes for us. The food was great. People were friendly. The views were just spectacular, right? There are so many things to see there. Like from the Roman times, you have the Roman amphitheater, the ruins of Roman baths, which the site's still quite big today, even though it didn't seem like you could actually go down to walk along the ground there, but you can still see it from the street and it's pretty incredible.
I was really impressed. There's not many places that you spend such little time and feel like as if you belong. It was a really cool vibe there.
Yes, I agree with that. There's also a number of museums, like we mentioned, there's those Roman sites. Then there is a number of churches that are quite interesting. There's a huge theater there, which actually surprised me. And from that perspective, I think it's definitely a place that would appeal to us for us to live in and feel comfortable in. But there's also other things I'm excited about Chieti, and that's the proximity to the sea, like we've already mentioned, but also to the mountains.
My interest is always hitting the beach and relaxing, on a recliner. So, but there are, quite a few interesting sites in the area. I think one of the main ones is the Magellan National Park. It's actually just a short distance outside of Chieti, and it's actually great for hiking. I've seen some photos and some of the interesting videos online, and they all look beautiful. It's such a cool forested area where you can go ahead and have a nice trek through the valleys and hills. So that's going to be one of the highlights for me, at least.
Yeah, and I think we could see the mountains, right? When you're in Chieti, there's mountains kind of around, and I think Magella is one of the ones that we saw that had the snow-capped mountaintops. That was sort of almost like you would almost consider it behind Chieti. I don't know if that's the right way of looking at it. But another one that I am a bit more excited to explore is the Gran Sasso, which when you think of these really kind of drastic, rocky mountain covered in like snow with like valleys, green valleys and lakes. That's sort of what Gran Sasso looks like. And again, if you're going to go hiking, I think that's a bit more advanced hiking area. And I think there's a lot of tourists that go there, especially, those interested in outdoor activities. I think they all tend to go to, again, all these parks. And I think Gran Sasso for me is definitely something that I would love to explore.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that also. From what I've seen and just being able to view it from afar, it looks really, really cool.
There's another park. So now you're looking at 3 national parks. This one is the Abruzzo National Park. This one looks like there's more valleys and rivers and lakes. But one of the things that makes me not so keen on that one is that it's famous for its population of Marsican brown bears, Apennine wolves, and deer. I'm not sure if that's something I want to experience on my hike.
That's one of the things I probably would not look forward to running into, especially one of those brown bears that I saw in some of those photos. So that might be something we'd have to probably plan out properly if we do that. But I think that's probably one of those guided tour type events.
Well, he did say that it has opportunities for mountain biking and riding and even like horseback riding. So they must have some kind of trails and, sort of not as in like the wilderness kind of hiking, because I think that's where you would counter the bears and the wolves, which again, I'm not too keen on.
We've actually been to Abruzzo before with, week-long beach vacations. We've been to Alba Adriatica, which is a great, great spot for relaxing and, has a really, really great nightlife. It's about an hour away from Chieti, so I'm looking forward to exploring the rest of the beachfronts myself. So I don't know what do you think?
Well, me, I do love Alba Adriatica, and I think we discovered that place years ago, right? I think we were actually trying to get to Rimini, and we ended up in Alba Adriatica. I think we tried to live there for the night, and we actually ended up loving it. So it's a very popular beach destination, and it's the strip with bars and restaurants, got those beaches. You can pay for an umbrella and a chair, or there's some hotels that come with it. And I think you also get that in like closer to like where Chieti is, right? So near Pescara. Like you mentioned, there's the Francavilla, Almare, and Ortona. Those are a bit more well-known to like Italians beach areas. And we should also mention that the beach there is like a sandy beach, right? The water is very warm in the summertime. I'm not sure about now, but those are very sandy beaches. They're not very steep. When you go out to the water, it's sort of, flat and steady when you go into the water.
So there's also, a little more secluded beach areas. If you want to avoid some of the crowds and just enjoy some quiet time, that's actually south of Chieti. There is a spot towards Vasto, and you'll find smaller beaches, smaller alcoves and inlets for, I guess more of a less touristy feel. You'll probably see that it's quite busy anyway in the later portion of the summer, but I probably recommend going in June or July.
We originally went to Chieti to look at some properties and decide whether we like it or not. We did see a number of properties. Now, I don't think we found anything that we were looking for, but we've discovered that we would like to live in Chieti. So we will definitely be going back to check out more properties and explore more of the region. And I think it would be a great place for us to live. What do you think?
I'm actually really excited. I'm looking forward to, exploring more of Chieti and checking out some more properties. We've seen quite a few great spots, some renovated, some not so much. But, I think in a later episode, we'll delve into the property scene over in Chieti.
For sure. So for now, we'll just leave you with a teaser of Chieti and why you should visit. Don't forget to check out the show notes for more information. And we hope you book your next trip to Chieti when you're in Italy.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Ciao.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.